And I am really glad that we left the grizzly bear out in the other room today, because
So am I.
that's a little creepy. Hey, welcome everyone to PDQ Live. This is a very exciting webcast for us. This is one we've been working on for quite some time. We have a very special guest with us. Trina, I want to make sure, Limpert, is that the?
Limpert, yes,
Limpert,
thank
okay.
you.
Got the pronunciation correct. Could you tell us a little, you're CEO of RizeNext,
Right?
and co-founder of Tech Moms,
Correct.
which is,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about Tech Moms and a little bit about your background, and then we'll turn it over to these guys. I'll disappear and we'll just, go.
We'll give the shortest version I possibly can, but I mean, 30 years in the tech industry. So I've worked for companies, Novell back in the day, Oracle, eBay, and had always been very involved in women in IT. Eventually became the global president of women in IT at eBay, overseeing a large organization. We had 1,500 members in 17 countries, very passionate for seeing more women in the industry and take advantage of the opportunities that are there. And I got to the point where I started to have a lot of organizations and companies saying, can you come do consulting for us? Can you come help us set up our DEI organizations, our employee resource groups? And it started to grow organically that way. And eventually started my own consulting firm, but I do IT consulting as well through RizeNext, providing opportunities for a lot of the women that are coming out of Tech Moms, and then also helping from a diversity and inclusion perspective. And one of the programs that I had started was one called, at the time underneath RizeNext, I had been frustrated as a leader at eBay and others in trying to find IT diverse candidates. And a lot of times they say, well, they just don't exist, right? And I got frustrated with that response. And at the same time, I had a lot of women coming to me and saying, Trina, I see all this opportunity in the tech industry. How do I get in? And that's when I went, we've got to disconnect. There's a massive disconnect happening I can't find enough IT consultants. I can't find local. I was having to hire off visas and bring people into the country, and that gap. And then seeing this highly educated, skilled workforce just wanting to get in, but couldn't figure out their way in. And so that's why we founded Tech Moms. We've been running 2.5 years. We're actually launching our 18th, 19th cohorts this next Saturday. So we've got 90 women in classes right now. So by the end of the year, we'll have put over 300 women through the program with really high success rates in placement into higher education and to building this amazing community of women in IT.
That's impressive. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. And very much needed. In fact, Tara, you, as we were kind of preparing for this, one of the first questions that you had was, addressing the elephant in the room. Why does it seem like this is such a difficult topic for some companies and for some people to dive into?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I wanted to kind of start with you, Trina, is that, and I am a woman in IT, and it has been really uncomfortable for me prepping for this webcast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way I can put it. I have been making jokes nonstop. And I think it's just because it's uncomfortable for me to even, first of all, think about all the things that have happened to me in my career. Number one, it's easier to make jokes about it. That's the truth.
Than to be real.
And
Trina, I'm gonna have you pull that mic a little closer to you. There you go. Perfect.
Are we good?
Then to kind of like relive it, and then as I did all the research, because I over-research everything, it just is like more and more depressing. You look at the numbers and you're like, oh my gosh, is this fixable?
That's where we take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Everybody right now just, okay, we're going to let go. And I do this training a lot. So I think it's good to start with that. Start with the elephant in the room. It is uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about this subject. It can get very emotional. As I was walking in, I was sharing that, when I do these sessions, it does get emotional. It does get heavy. And I have to give myself time to recover quite often because these are heavy topics. They're heavy discussions. And it's okay, though, to recognize that and say that's what's going to take for us to be able to really get in and And, we say the greatest leaders are the ones that get outside their comfort zone. That's how we grow. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We have to get uncomfortable. We have to get comfortable being uncomfortable and be able to have these conversations. And the more you have them, the more comfortable you get.
Yeah.
And then it's easier to have the next one and the next one and the next conversation, and being open to feedback and kind of looking at ourselves, right, is a hard thing to do sometimes, to look in the mirror and do that. So I think it's great to start out that way, saying, you know what, there might be times in this session where you're just starting to feel angry, or have emotions of some kind. Recognize that and go, oh, why am I feeling that? Step away from the emotional a bit and kind of look in and go, why is that happening?
Yeah.
I think what's there?
For me, I'm just so used to it. It's been so many years where I'm the only female. I've never worked with another woman. And so I'm just so incredibly used to it. So kind of like diving into it was a different experience for me.
We build up some resilience.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to step back and be able to say, okay, it's good to have these conversations and recognize some of our biases and stereotypes and inequities that are there, and they're real.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good place for us to start talking. Is the best numbers I could come up with, I looked at a bunch of different ones, was the amount of women in IT is anywhere from 18 to 24. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, it does.
That's the average.
That's about the average I've been seeing over the last couple decades as I've been monitoring. We sit around, I think in Utah, we're right around 18% typically, 15 to 18% women in IT. Outside nationally, those are about the numbers.
Well, and the disturbing thing that I read is that since the pandemic, we've actually gone down 2%.
We have. Yeah, I think this is good to start with. Why is this important? Why do these numbers matter? Because if you look at it, prior to the pandemic, we were about 123 years before we start seeing pay equity. And now we're 135 in a year. We've taken a huge step back.
Okay, wait, let me ask a question. Do you mean it's going to take that long before we have equitable pay?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's why these conversations are important.
Yeah.
And it can't just be women talking to women. It's got to be everybody has to be part of this change, or else we won't see it. We won't see it in my lifetime. My daughters, your daughters, our family, our friends will not see the benefit of pay equity if we don't start doing something now, and seeing that we can all be part of this change. That's, really why we have these conversations, is to, be open, create these opportunities for understanding and being able to do something about it.
Well, and another number I wanted to run by you, because it doesn't seem like it could be true, but maybe it is I saw that women of color, the numbers dropped dramatically to 2 to 5%. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Absolutely accurate. One of the things that we're doing this next year, and anyone that wants to get involved with Tech Moms and the work we're doing, we are targeting doing a Tech Moms in Color this next year, because of this specific issue. Is that, yes, the issues for women in IT are there and real, but for women of color, it's even more drastic. And so really looking at how do we hire and be aware in our hiring practices. I had a really amazing VP one time that said, all candidates 50%. And I know a lot of people have some hesitation towards quotas, right? Or setting numbers, or, that feels like just it's forced. But what it's doing is actually changing your mindset to thinking about it. It's not about the numbers. It's like, oh, I'm being more aware and intentional in my hiring practices of, am I bringing in 50% women? And if I can't find them, is it because my network's not broad enough? Am I not looking in the right place? Like, what can I do about it? And it's, so, even though a quota may feel forced, know that it's changing the way of thinking in how we can make adjustments for women of color, individuals of color, or, just kind of broader thinking that way.
Well, let me ask you this question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear, well, I think I know what I've researched, but what benefits do organizations get from hiring more women in the IT industry?
Yeah. I think I love starting with why. This is a great place to start, right? Because then it gets everybody kind of on board and going, okay, what can I do to change? Well, first of all, we're all in business to make money. So let's start there.
Right.
Growth and profitability. There is definite studies out there showing over 35%, up to 50+% higher growth and profitability in a company when you have women in the team.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is creativity and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just even for my own experiences and how this came to fruition is I remember when I did my computer science degree, sitting in a group project, and we were trying to solve this problem we'd been given, right? And the team, I was a little shy, I guess you could say, when I first go in. When you're the only woman on a team, it can be really hard. You're kind of like, you start questioning yourself a little bit. And so I remember thinking, okay, they're working towards this, and it was very complicated what they were doing. And I'm like, well, are they smarter than me? Like, why are they doing it this way? I was just had this internal dialogue going on. And I finally worked up the courage to go, hey, what if we did it this way?
Mm-hmm.
And they went, oh yeah, that is better. Why don't we do it that way? It's just sometimes everybody brings different life experience and different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's right or wrong every time, you want that.
Yeah.
You want that diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Right. In your teams. And it helps lead to broader markets.
Mm-hmm.
The markets that we're targeting are diverse. They're going to be both men and women. And so the more you can bring that in, that's why you see higher growth and profitability at a company.
And don't you think that prospective job seekers want that diversity to companies that they go to?
Yeah. I mean, this is a big topic I have for a lot of the companies I consult with, is how do we attract talent?
Mm-hmm.
And right now, individuals, the candidates are looking for companies that are more diverse, have more diverse teams, have more open cultures. They're wanting that. And it's hard to attract talent right now. And if you're not a company that is focused on that, you're going to have a hard time attracting talent and retaining talent. And that's where the profitability issues come. Yeah. Is when you're losing talent, that's 1.5 times to replace them in cost. It's a huge profitability loss if you're not able to create environments that are inclusive and can retain those teams.
Yeah, it is a money issue for sure.
Yes.
Well, and PDQ is definitely one of those companies. They're very forward thinking, and I can tell you it's so refreshing to be at a company like that. And the diversity, it just smacks you over the face the second you walk in, and I absolutely love it. And so I definitely think that's a factor, and everything you just said rings true. But one thing that you said is a shame, I think, but it's true for, I believe, most women, is you said that you had that doubt voice in your head. Should I speak up? Yeah. And I had to get the courage to speak up. Yeah. And what a shame.
Yeah. And where did that come from? Because when I chose to go into computer science, I didn't think twice about it. Mm-hmm. I didn't even think, oh, I don't belong, or I shouldn't be here, which I hear sometimes. Mm-hmm. I went in full force saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. I think it came in some of the way I was treated within the classroom.
Oh, that's
and so I think that, being aware of that, like, our actions matter. Are we engaging? I think a lot of my classmates and even some of my professors didn't engage with me, kind of pushed me off. And so I think it was something that I picked up along the way. It wasn't something I went in thinking that way. It started the way I was treated while I was in the classroom.
But yours started in school, because that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it even started in high school. You look back, it's all the way from the beginning. I can call out moments of challenges and things that were happening along the way.
Well, one thing I read is that we have made progress as a country with more women going into the STEM studies and in fact, completing their degree, getting placed in an IT job, and then something called the retention gap comes into play where they're actually leaving it. Yeah. So I'm curious about why you think that is. What do you think is making women leave the job?
Yeah, there's multiple reasons, right? There's a lot of things that are happening within the workforce. As far as it can be very isolating. If you've only hired one woman and they're the token woman on the team, that's a really hard situation for anyone to be. And so looking at your team and creating more broader diversity. Also, if there's ways to engage within the company itself and being who your whole self forward,
Mhm.
right? I remember a lot of times I felt like I had to hide I was a mother.
Mm.
And you had to feel like you couldn't be your whole self or bring your whole self forward. That's where the belonging piece comes in, right? Do I
Yeah.
feel like I can be who I am fully within a work environment, and do I feel like I belong here? All those aspects create an environment where I want to stay. Pay. I've left companies because I couldn't get a promotion. There was twice in my career where I was told, you didn't get this promotion because he has a family to be provided for. Twice. And this isn't, going back decade. I've had tech moms come to me with this last year. So this is still a stereotype and perception out there of your career is limited because you're a woman. And if you're in an environment like that, guess what? You're going to leave and find somewhere else where the opportunity is there, and your contributions are going to be considered.
Mhm.
So, I think that sometimes as I go in, I've had this comment a few times where, sexism isn't really a thing anymore, right?
No.
and it
definitely-
surprises me. I'm like, yeah, it is.
Mhm.
It's still there. I do an exercise in some of my trainings where I'll have, if I mention like a scenario where somebody has gone through something similar, I'll have them put a Y in the chat,
Mhm.
and it'll just be flowing down, the chat. They'll just be, it just to create awareness that, yeah, this is happening, and you may not be aware that you're doing it,
Mhm.
which is where I think a lot of that fear comes from a lot
Mhm.
of individuals. Like, what if I do something wrong? It's okay. We're all have biases. I do
Mhm.
things all the time where I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that,
Mhm.
right? And it's men, women, everyone has biases. But the more you're aware of it, and the more you can be intentional and change and create open communication with your teams to say, if I do something that, I don't want to be offensive, but I might do something, can you let me know? Like, pull me to the side, kind of give me
Mhm.
some heads up, because unconscious bias is real and you don't even realize you're doing it sometimes.
Yeah, and you're talking about the more subtle things.
Yeah.
Like we haven't even talked about overt sexism. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
the really bad
The
stuff
bad
that
stuff.
I hate to tell everybody, yes, it's still alive and well in the
Yeah.
workforce. But that actually brings me to another question. I actually saw this morning when I was looking around, and certain points you would expect to find, but this one surprised me a teeny bit. But it would be the advice that I would give somebody.
Yeah.
One of the predictors of success for women lasting in IT is having a thick skin.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you?
No, but I don't think it's just on the woman to have to just put up with it their whole
No.
career. That's
Absolutely
why we're
not.
here creating awareness, right?
Right.
Is
I do
that,
have a
yeah.
question on this one.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I'm very uncomfortable interrupting on this one just because.
No, that's what we
How
do.
dare you speak?
No, please.
Go back to your
Please
corner.
do.
The entire pre-show, we were talking about how I'm just generally an abrasive person,
Mhm.
and it's just who I am. But how do I prevent it from being viewed as like if I'm abrasive to Tara? I'm not being sexist. It's just who I am as
Yeah,
a person.
you just want to be
Just
yourself
abrasive.
too.
Yeah.
Right?
So I guess how do I make that disconnect where no, I'm just unpleasant, which I don't know if that's better, but
No.
It's an equal opportunity abrasion.
Yeah,
is the-
everybody could be who they are. I think that's what we're trying to get to, is we don't want any of our gentlemen allies to feel like they can't be who they are, and women didn't feel like they can't. How do we bridge that divide, right? Like, how do we all show up as ourselves and saying, but we also need to be respectful,
Mhm.
right, of others. And so I think having open communication and just saying, hey, if I ever, this is who I am, but just putting it out there of, if I do something that might be offensively, just let me know.
Yeah. On
Right.
both
Just
sides.
let me
Yeah.
know both ways.
Mhm.
Like, I might do something, and I always appreciated, quick feedback.
Mhm.
As a leader, that was something I always sought for, was that I always created an open door policy with my teams and said, if I do something, please let me know immediately that of what happened and what the scenario was, so
Right.
I can make an adjustment. It's the same thing in these scenarios of like,
Mhm.
if I said something or if I spoke over someone. Interrupting is a very common um, issue for women, where they get spoke over or not heard.
Mhm.
Right. So if you see somebody else doing that, say something,
Mm-hmm.
right, on their behalf, or allow somebody to say something after a meeting. Just having that open forum and saying it's okay. We know these things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make it okay for us, somebody to say and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Not in an adversarial way, but just saying, hey,
Yeah.
this is how this made me feel. And it's
Well,
okay to talk through that.
And I think we talked about this a lot this week and weeks prior, actually. There's been a lot of conversation. And I think these are good conversations to have. As you said, you have to first address the problem, the elephant in the room. But in IT and engineering and some other fields, and I'm making sweeping generalization. Let me start with that. But social and emotional intelligence sometimes are a little on the lower end in these fields.
Yeah.
Do you think that is part of the struggle for women in these fields?
I think so. I think there is some of that. I just went to an IT conference. I was speaking in Florida at their association for CIOs. And there's a difference when I go to like a marketing conference, to a sales conference, or, to an IT conference. Just some social discomfort in just having social conversations it's apparent.
Yes.
Right. And so I don't want to do broad generalizations, but I have seen that where there's a little bit more social discomfort in some of those scenarios, and being able to work through that is maybe a little bit harder. I see that more predominantly in the IT industry. The other thing that I see through the years, and it's not necessarily just gender based, but in leadership, in being able to lead teams in the IT industry, we have a lot of focus on the skill sets, the products we know, the technologies, that side of it. And that's usually how we get promoted into leadership. But the people skills aren't always in pair with the promotions. And so really having good leadership people skills along with the technical skills makes it harder for some technical leaders to be able to really manage broad people teams.
Yes. And actually, so you and I talked about that. Another stat I read is that women in IT decrease as their career increases, meaning there's less leaders
in
that
IT.
are women. But that's actually been the opposite for me in my career. So why do you think that is? Is it a numbers game that there's just less women leaders because there's less women in IT? Or do you think what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think it's the opportunities for projects and skill sets and being moved up. There's a lot of issues in this space. I don't think we'd have time today to walk through them all. But one of the things that I had recognized as I was running initiatives at various companies, and we'll look at the data. I'm a very data-driven person, so it helps to baseline and say where we at from a women in leadership perspective or various dimensions. And what I would see is that usually a company will have like, how many women do we have in leadership across the company? But if you pull that back the next layer and you say, okay, and then now let's look at just IT. I haven't seen a company yet that their IT numbers weren't lower than their general company numbers, right? And so what I'm seeing is that the opportunities to be given stretch goals, stretch leadership opportunities, pushed into management. There's this feeling of having to always prove yourself more. I had this a lot within my career of like, you've got to do almost double the work in order to get recognized and move up in your career. Sponsorships are a big part of it. Who's speaking up on your behalf to get you into those roles, really that networking side of it, and connecting. There's a lot of things that are prohibiting that, but I think the first step for any organization is to be looking at their data. Look at your numbers and say, are we equivalent promotion cycles for women as we are to men within our organizations, and seeing what every organization is different too. I can't give like a blanket, do this and then it all goes away. Every organization is going to maybe be facing different challenges or different issues, and may need to make various adjustments within the organization to alleviate the problem in promotion cycles.
Do you think that women need women mentors?
Yes, but they also need male mentors and sponsors. And there's a very big difference between mentorship and sponsorship.
What's that difference?
So mentors are individuals that can maybe connect with you and say, hey, I'm dealing with this issue. Can you give me feedback? What am I doing right? What am I wrong? Right.
Mhm.
And kind of like have a one-on-one conversation in from a career perspective. A sponsor is somebody that is vocally an advocate for you. So this is really where a lot of women, if you don't have a good networking sponsorship within your company, you may not have people advocating for you in your behalf. When you go into a promotion cycle, I used to call it the promotion battle. I don't know if anybody's dealt with that before, where it's like all the managers get together and then they battle for who on their team should get promoted. And it was usually whoever was most vocal about their team. One of the biases that typically shows up is I will be an advocate for somebody that's like me. But so you don't get those same sponsorships or advocacy for women coming. If you have a large male population in leadership, you're not getting that same sponsorship. And so for women to have male sponsors advocating for them in their career, talking about them, being vocal about what they did, what their, accomplishments are, where they think they can see them going, giving them those opportunities, that's what really makes a shift.
And should that be the company that sets that up?
I think that being aware, if you're not hearing of sponsorships coming from various managers, if it's typically the same people they're talking about, then maybe the company needs to look at their promotion cycles and how they're being managed.
Yeah.
But I think it is a responsibility of both the leaders and women on the team to be able to develop those sponsorships and saying, okay, how can I help promote individuals within the organization?
You know how you said we were barely going to scratch the surface?
Mhm.
Yeah, we're 25 minutes in and
Yeah,
we barely scratched the surface.
Yeah,
Exactly.
there's a lot here.
We've got a couple of comments and questions I
Yeah.
want to jump into. This is from Amy, and it was +1 by Beth. I've been working in IT for 20 years, and this discussion and the points made resonate with me so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And to be honest, this is a webcast that we have wanted to do for a very long time. We've recognized the fact that women are just underrepresented in IT. And as Tara mentioned, we're a company that really believes in diversity and inclusion. And we're like, what can we do? And this is kind of another question that ties into that. What are good locations to post jobs and reach beyond standard locations? How can
Yes.
you
Oh, I love that
do
question. This is where I get into my tech moms work quite a bit. So LinkedIn, let's talk LinkedIn real quick, because I think that's where a lot of people go. If you're looking for return to work or for women that don't have a network, they're not going to be on LinkedIn, right? And I think that's part of the challenge. That's any underserved community, not just women in IT. You're going to have to go outside of the normal avenues to be able to connect and find women. And that's what's so great with what we're doing with Tech Moms. We do placement of our women into companies, and we're always looking for entry-level roles. So if you have those, please get a hold of me.
Amazing.
I have women. I have them. Very skilled, very knowledgeable, long-term knowledge and experience sets. Just looking to get that, open the door, right? And let us start working. And
Jenna, are you listening?
yeah,
Call Trina. Call Trina.
Call me. I think that communities like ours, going to the schools, creating internships, apprenticeships where they can get on the job training and experience to transition, those doors need to be opened more often. And then give them the mentoring and support to be able to make it into the next step in their career. There's such a powerful thing that happens when I call it the tap on the shoulder. And that could be anybody, where you're like, hey, they would be really great at data and analytics. They would be great at what? Just start thinking about the women in your life and then around you and being like, they may not be tech now, but they could be, right? And so I do this. I'll be like, hey, you know what? You'd be really great in technical sales. And here's why. And it's just like turn something on and they just go. And it's just like somebody just having the confidence in them to be able to say, you can do this, and then give them the pathway just is really powerful.
So like companies like ours, can they sign up to be like intern program companies for you?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a great
absolutely.
idea.
We've done a couple programs. We're working on some others, but One that we did with Market Star just this last summer is we did a technical sales program, and they trained for advanced technical sales and created BDMs out of I think we had over 20 women in the program that then came out and are now doing technical sales. So we can do the same thing for like internships into IT support. We've had a lot of women go into technical support across the board. Yeah.
Got another quick question for you from Luke B. He says, what can non-managerial employees do to help?
Yeah, I think that some of those things, you can be a sponsor and advocate just as much as a manager, right? You don't have to be in a leadership position to be able to talk about your fellow teammates and say, hey, look at the great things she's doing. Or doing that tap on the shoulder and, helping someone move into more advanced roles or technical roles, or sharing. We do a lot of coding coaches actually that come into Tech Moms, and they're coding coaches, they're mentors, the networking. Out there networking with individuals and women to be able to broaden their network is a huge career advancement opportunity.
I really liked what you said. Be aware when women are being spoken over. I really like that. That's something anyone can do, right?
Yeah. And this is really helpful. I wish so much in my career, as things were happening in a meeting. I had one specifically where I was in a meeting and there's like, I was leading our, I did DevOps. And so I was leading all of our operational meeting, and someone was speaking over me and then made a really kind of backhanded comment and just, like a little dig, and then just left it. And somebody spoke up on my behalf. And I valued that so much because it as a woman, you like always defending yourself, you come across aggressive, right? That's another one of those. We'll talk about too and should maybe. You're too aggressive, you're too crisp, but you're dealing with this all the time. It just gets exhausting, and your reactions sometimes can come across as like harsh, right? Like, can't believe that just happened.
Right.
But when somebody speaks up on my behalf and says, hey, that probably wasn't okay, or hey, wait, Trina was talking, let's let her continue. Having those, what they call allies in the room, that's aware that these situations are going to be happening and stopping them and kind of going, hey, time out, let's address this.
Yeah.
Right. I think that is so valuable.
Yeah. Well, you don't get that thicker skin overnight. Like, you get it from these experiences that are unpleasant, and you tend to, unfortunately, you become meaner.
Yeah.
That's the sad reality.
Yeah.
Well, and we had talked about this the other day. There is a double standard when men react that way. They're seen as being go-getters and aggressive, or just but with women, it's like you're saying, it's characterized differently.
It is. I have a great way of explaining this. So I went back to school and did business strategy at Harvard. And we did a case study on this where they had taken, how our Harvard business cases, if anybody's gone to business school, you've gone through and you do the business case on here's what this company did, here's how they did a turnaround, right? All of these things. And they used a case of a woman CEO that had done this amazing turnaround for her company. They took it and did an A/B study where they had her version of it. And then they went through and changed all the gender form and name to male. And then they got feedback from the teams at Harvard on what was their response, right, for each of these cases. Well, for the male one, it was like he was so strong, he was so determined, he knew what to do, he was aggressive, like it was all positive. In the female one, it was like she was too bossy, she didn't know what she's doing, like it was her case. It was, and it's just knowing that just gender can switch our thinking on somebody's performance just because of the gender form.
There was a big thread on Twitter yesterday. I don't know if you saw, but you should maybe look at it, about a female judge who she was admonishing the lawyers for not being prepared for court. And there was a whole thread about just saying how inappropriate she was simply because she was a woman.
Right.
And a lot of people are posting male judges doing the exact same thing. Nothing was said. Not one thing. It was very interesting.
I call it the two red flags, like, because I like to give actions to be like, watch out for. So look for the words to and should. You're too aggressive, you're too crisp, you're too, of anything. That's taking an idea of what's in your head, of what you think somebody should be behaving like, and they're not in your mind. And so they're too of something, right? Also, you should be like this. You should do this. That's another red flag.
You should smile more.
You should
Trina.
smile more. I've had that so many times. I'm like, oh, I smile.
Mhm.
See,
Two
I can do
almost
it.
sounds like a backhanded compliment.
It
Like
is.
you're this,
Yeah.
but you're just to this.
You're and I remember I was applying for a position and they came back and said, well, you're just too crisp. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Give you a hug and bake you some cookies? I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm going to do the freaking job. Like and it was 15 years later. I'm not even kidding. 15 years later, I had a gentleman come to me and apologize. It had bothered him so much for 15 years that they had not hired me in this position. He knew that it was wrong, right? For that. And he came, he's like, we should have hired you. It's always bothered me. 15 years later. So
Well, good for him.
Yeah, but don't let it go
Yeah.
15 years
Mhm.
disrupted in the moment and going, oh, why am I feeling uncomfortable with this decision? Or is this real? Why, is this really a true, or is this a bias?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we were right in the fact that we have barely even scratched
Barely.
the surface.
Yeah.
And we've
6 minutes over.
Yeah, we're already at time, but I'd like to give just an opportunity if there's any final thoughts, any suggestions, or anything that you think you want to tell the audience. If you give them one word of advice, and I know that's so limiting. I mean, one word of advice, really.
Yeah.
But what would that be?
Just step forward and be aware. Don't be afraid of learning more on these topics. I think with us starting out and saying, you might feel uncomfortable or you might feel forced or it might feel this, just be okay with those feelings and just do the work little by little. I've been working with doing some micro learning. So then you can do little bite-sized 2 minutes a day, right? Like 2 minutes a day on learning about this could go a long way in changing our behaviors. So I would just say lean in and start kind of just making small adjustments as you go.
So we've had a few people in the chat request we keep going, but it depends. I know your time is valuable. You're here as a favor to us.
Yeah.
I mean, are
I'm
you
good.
comfortable with that? Or
Oh yeah, I'm fine to keep going.
We certainly can. This is, like I said, this was a topic that we've wanted to do for a long time. We have you here. It's like, can we take advantage of this, please?
Well, I want to, if we're going to
Did
keep
we have
going, I want to
questions?
ask her. Oh, sorry.
We've had a few. I've gotten to most of them, but yeah, go ahead, Tara.
Trina, I'm very interested in how do companies stop that retention gap problem?
Yeah, I think that starting with awareness training is a big one. And this is why I've been really leaning towards the micro learning process, is because pulling teams out and sitting in a 2 to 4 hour situation or training, I should call it. And then a lot of times it's like, okay, I'm being forced to do this. There's a cognitive dissonance that can happen. It can retaliate back onto the group you're trying to support. And so there's some alternatives that I've been looking at in doing, like these small, like I said, 2-minute videos, kind of gamifying it, making it more engaging, just creating daily shifts in our way of thinking is one that I've been leaning towards. The other is looking at our data. It tells a story. When you step back and we do qualitative and quantitative reporting on how is our organization feeling, where are the opportunities, and start to address those, put plans in place to say, this is the feedback we're getting from our teams. Here's some adjustments we can make. Just take small initiatives to make progress forward. And I think that starts to speak to the team to say, they actually care about these things. Let's make some adjustment. And they're making adjustments. I can see it. I'm more willing to stay. Or I have an organization I can talk to, or a community I can work with that is helping me work through some of these challenges.
And I should have prefaced the question with some explanation, because I don't think I did a good job. The retention gap is when you get women in the workforce, you get them in the IT field, and they soon quit.
Yeah.
Because something about the environment isn't working for them. And that seems to be kind of a hot topic. Like, what is making them quit? So
yeah, I think some of these things we talked about, some of the aggressive behavior against women, some of the biases, there's a number of things that are happening. It's not when we say sexism, we kind of like everybody has their own perspective on what that is. But you have stereotypes on what their role is or what they should be or where they should be at. You have biases, unconscious biases, the way that they're spoken to sometimes. And you have the equity issues.
Mhm.
And so it could be in any four of those spectrums that are creating challenges for women where they don't feel like they belong or have the opportunities. I can say the number one thing, if you were to do one thing today, this is what I would say to do, is focus on the results of your organization. What is it that you want your organization to accomplish? What are your goals? And having career development discussions around those results, because what it does is it takes away the performance risk and bias, because you're saying, this is what I expect out of this role. This is what I expect to be done. That's the goal. And it removes the risk of, well, you didn't do these tasks or something like that. It's like, give them a performance-based review based on results and goals, not on tasks completed. And I think those conversations, those career development discussions, give them like, here's the results. Here's the skills we want you to develop. You'd be really great in going into this career. We're going to support you in your career. Moving into more of a career-focused, results-focused discussion really helps alleviate a lot of these issues.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these things that you've talked about are things that my career has been a lot in management, IT management. And these are a lot of things that I've done as an IT manager that I find noticeably absent in many IT teams is a lot of the teams that I've worked on, they don't want to talk to you. Number one, like, please stop talking to me. I want to go in my office and make group policies, right? It's a little hard discussion to have at times, but these are very valuable conversations. So do you think that a lot of women are not given these opportunities and these conversations aren't happening, and so then they're choosing to leave? Is that your perception?
Yeah, I can't do a blanket, here's what's happening for everyone. But some of the situations I've seen, and I think we talked about this the other day, and I think it's good to bring up again, because I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, on the Me Too movement and not engaging with women out of fear. Right.
Yes.
And not maybe doing one-on-ones, maybe not including them in team activities. It's that inclusion piece that's missing.
Right. I can't joke. I can't say anything. You can't joke with these people.
Yeah. And just what I would say to that, because I think that, Kelly, what you had mentioned is you had a scenario where they started leaving the door open when they were having conversations. Yeah. And I've been thinking about this last couple of days, and I would say, if you were to do that, don't just leave the door open for the women, leave the door open for everybody. Exactly. Because guess what happens? You start making them feel really uncomfortable. Yeah. Right. And so whatever is going to work, that's going to create comfort in those scenarios, create opportunity to engage equally within your team so that they're getting the same amount of one-on-one time. They're getting the same focus on their career. They're getting the same pay and promotion opportunities. Whatever that is, just make sure that you're doing it equally across all of your teams.
Well, and I think what might be a good question, how do you handle an environment where you have had a bad thing happen to you in your career? So there's not enough time in the day to really.
I think this is what everybody wants to know, not just women, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I've had so many bad experiences. I'm sure you have as well. But say you have a pretty bad one, right?
Yeah.
A pretty bad one. And I've had some experiences in my career where I haven't even bothered to go to HR because I'm like, well, that's a waste of time.
Yeah.
How do you recover from that as a woman and continue going on?
I think there's an importance of having a broad network.
Okay.
Because it creates safety and knowing that you're going to be able to shift your careers. If you're in a bad situation, we don't want to create these environments where people are leaving, but as an individual, knowing that I have opportunity to leave and that there's a broader opportunities out there and it'll create more future career progress for me. I think that's important for women to really focus on building their networks. And an area where I haven't seen maybe the investment. Most individuals I was working with, especially when I was doing, leadership training and initiatives, is they'd be very focused on the tasks within the role itself and not on their career. And so really creating an environment where it's like, if am in a bad situation, first of all, being able to speak up and have a voice about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a network and you know that there's opportunities outside of this one, you're not going to be afraid of the conversation.
Yes.
Right. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to go have this conversation. If it doesn't play out well, okay, then I know my next step.
Yeah.
But too many times in my career did I just not say anything and I silently suffered.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I would have just stepped up and known my own power of going, you know what? This doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It just means it's the end of this position.
Yeah. How many women do you think feel they have power to go do that?
Not very many.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of fear,
Mhm.
there's a lot of uncertainty in losing our jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have families we're providing for.
Yeah.
Despite the, we're not providing for our families. There's a heavier, we want the security. We want to know we're safe. We want to know that we're going to be taken care of and our careers are going to move forward where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking up is just like for anybody. It's not just women, right? Everybody feels this, of, that fear of like, if I say something, it's going to be a backlash. We just have an extra layer of challenges we've got to deal with when it comes to bias and stereotypes.
I've been transferred for reporting sexual harassment.
Yeah, there's like I said, there's so many stories that I hear all the time, and I think it's important for us to be willing to say that, that these are happening. I've been at business conferences and gotten attacked in an elevator. Luckily I turned out okay, but it's like these situations happen. Those are the extreme ones. They're luckily not the ones that happen all the time.
No,
but it's just an extra layer. I was joking with somebody the other day. I'm like, we have this pay gap, equity gap. I'm like, we should be getting paid a premium for the stuff we have to deal with. Like, why aren't we getting paid more? Like, seriously,
I think you're right. There are definitely the extreme stories, but it's the everyday,
there's the little slight things that happen every day that you're just, okay, I'm just going to move through this one.
No,
and
for
then,
sure.
And it is a hard thing to know. When do I speak up? When do I not?
Yes, because sometimes it's so extreme. Physical, threats of physical
blatant.
harm, obviously, sexual harassment.
Yeah.
That seems pretty obvious. But yeah, when do you know?
When do you know? That's
up?
right.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is listen to your gut, because this is what I found is when I would wake up in the morning and I am just sick about thinking about having to go into the office.
Yeah.
That's not how we should be living. And I did that for a few years, unfortunately, where I'd be physically ill at the thought of having to go in and deal with what I was dealing with again.
Mm-hmm.
And I look back and go, okay, I probably could have said more.
Yeah.
And there's other times when I should have just left.
Right. Yeah. When do you know it's time to leave?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're like me, but I'd be more inclined to defend another woman.
Oh, yeah.
More so than myself.
Isn't that funny?
Is it interesting?
Yeah.
Or actually not even a woman, a man.
Yeah.
I have what I call my little work children. If you mess with one of my work children, it's going to go
get,
bad for you. Oh, yeah. You're going to see mean Tara.
Mama Bear comes out.
She's on a life quest to make me social.
Yes, I am on a life quest to make Jordan social.
So I am curious with like high school teaching things like Python now, so it's more readily available. You have things like Code Ninjas. Like my daughter's learning C#. She's less than 10. So the pipeline's going to grow, which makes it so there's more chance to hire for more. As the workforce starts to even out, do you think that kind of thing's just going to kind of phase out naturally or that? Or is it something, I mean, obviously can't ignore it, but I just wonder if.
I think there's a lot of work that has to be done on the bias and unconscious bias, stereotypes, pay equity. Those things are going to take more work as well to the pipeline development. So it's not a one-pronged approach here, right? We do need to build up the knowledge and the skill sets within our youth, and there's a lot of great programs happening there. But you'll also see a lot of women drop out between 8th grade and high school. Mm-hmm. So even though they're learning the skills young, they drop out because of these social pressures and social norms that are preventing them from seeing themselves as being women in IT.
Yeah.
And so there's some work. That's why we bring them back in later on when they're moms, and now we're pulling them back into the workforce at a later time.
Yeah, and that self-doubt, that really resonated with me when you said women are more self-doubt. And Jordan's actually talked about this a lot. And he's basically a computer himself, but he suffers from imposter syndrome. So that's an interesting thing to talk about, is how do you reinforce that with women? How do you say, no, you don't have to outperform.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I've done, like just even with some of the team, we've hired a lot of our tech moms out of our community. And the first rule I say is you can't apologize anymore. I don't allow it. Right. Some of these like little things like over apologizing or doubt, like just, I call it pulling the weeds. I do a training that I call it pulling and chucking, like pull the weeds of doubt, chuck it. It's not allowed here. We just don't allow that. Right. It's going to happen. Figure out why you're doing it, chuck it, and replan it with something positive. And we do a lot of kind of that type of education in addition to the technical skills, which helps with the reinforcement and staying in and kind of the mindset shifts that have to happen as well.
Yeah.
No, that's smart.
That's awesome. Trina, thank you so much for your time
welcome.
and your expertise. If there are people that want to tap into that, how could they reach out? Yeah.
So if you're looking for training or consulting, RizeNext.com. It's RizeNext.com. Also with Tech Moms, if you want to get involved there, it's tech-moms.org.
Fantastic. Great discussion. I think I'd love to be able to do a part 2 to this at some point down the road. Because like you said, I'll show people. Look at that. We have barely scratched the surface of what we wrote down.
We got to number 2.
We did. Well, Trina, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Again, really appreciate it. And to the audience, thank you for your input and your comments. And look for part 2 coming at some point down the road. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you for being a part of our webcast today. If you had questions that we were not able to get to today, feel free to reach out to our support forums. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.